Hello everybody, I'm Bella and usually I post my van life updates. I do have some coming for you guys, but in my last few videos I mentioned I wanted to share a spooky kind of series where I discuss some of the scarier parts of life. This case actually has a little bit to do with van life as it involves a road trip gone wrong. So if you're interested in hearing more about this case, keep watching. Before we start, I wanted to talk a bit about why I'm doing these videos. I started this series because I have always been interested in the darker sides of human nature. In high school, I took as many psychology classes as I could and even took a forensics class. I also regularly watch other people's videos on YouTube and search for information on my own. I've always been fascinated with serial killers, criminal psychology, missing persons, and even the supernatural world. So I decided now would be the best time to incorporate all of this into my channel. I believe that it is important to look at all aspects of life, explore, find, and spread any information that can be useful to others. It's incredibly important to get these people's names and cases out there. Anything helps, and the families deserve information and answers for their loved ones. Today, I am starting a new series on this channel called Because of the nature of this video, I would like to warn those who may be sensitive to these subjects that viewer discretion is advised, and now would be the time to click off. Today, you will be hearing about the disappearance of Leah Roberts. Leah Roberts was a wonderful woman who was born on July 23rd, 1976 in Durham, North Carolina. This kind of freaked me out because I was actually born July 23rd as well, and I grew up somewhat near Durham, so it kind of freaked me out. That and some other parts of the case. Anyway, Leah was the youngest of 3 children. When she was 17, her father was diagnosed with chronic lung illness, which was difficult with everybody to cope with. Later, she began studying at North Carolina State University in 1995. When she was a sophomore, her mother died unexpectedly from heart disease. As you can imagine, such unexpected tragedy alongside of her father's illness that the family was already dealing with, life got very rough for the family and Leah took it hard, but wanted to make the most of her life. At this point, Leah decided it was best to take some time off of school. She returned in the fall of 1998 and was unfortunately involved in a serious car accident where she punctured her lung and shattered her femur. So surgeons had to put a metal rod next to her femur to help it heal. Later on, Leah told her sister Kara that she felt like she was going to die before the crash and was certain it'd be the end of her, and that after her recovery she was feeling born again, wanting to live life to the absolute fullest. Leah was very bright, and after being given a new perspective on life, she decided to take some time off of college. She had planned to go to Costa Rica in 1999 when her father suddenly died, 3 weeks before she was set to leave. Her family recalls that she didn't seem as affected by his death. Leah felt that she should continue with her field program, and since she was leaving the country and no longer had living parents, she granted her sister, Kara, power of attorney over her bank accounts. Leah had been studying for a degree in Spanish and anthropology. She was almost finished with her schooling, but then decided to drop out. She only had 6 more months to go, so Kara and Leah's brother Heath tried to persuade her, but she would not change her mind. They recall that she always resented the idea that everybody had to live the same way, and that everybody had to go to college, all of that. So she instead learned to play guitar and took up photography as a new hobby. Some of her friends described her as searching for something because she'd buy lots of music and books and seeming as if she was trying to find herself. She got a pet kitten, naming her Bee, and began hanging out at coffee houses, writing poetry and making new friends in the process. But her older core group of friends and her family became concerned with her emotional state, since she seemed to be pulling away from them more after dropping out of school and began trying to meet and make new friends and with new people. Among her new friends was Janine Quiller. Leah had discussed the idea of following in writer Jack Kerouac's footsteps and going on a road trip to the West with Janine, and from what I understand, she also discussed this road trip separately with Nicole Bennett, her roommate. She was very interested in one of the books Kerouac wrote called The Dharma Bums, which has scenes in Desolation Peak in Washington State. She expressed interest in visiting the peak because of Kerouac's novels. Leah asked Nicole if she wanted to join in on the road trip, but Nicole declined, citing that she had a job and other responsibilities to take care of. So now we're going to get a little bit more into the actual disappearance. On the morning of March 9th, 2000, Leah spoke on the phone with Kara about possible future plans, but they didn't make any commitments. Kara recalls the call ending with the understanding that they'd be seeing each other in the near future. Unfortunately, it wasn't so. Leah also, in the afternoon, had agreed to do a babysitting job with her roommate the next day. Nicole went to work and returned later. And that's when she noticed that Leah's 1993 white Jeep Cherokee wasn't there, and neither was Leah. At first, she thought nothing of it. Leah was the type of person to come and go unpredictably, and since she had dropped out of college and was living off of her inheritance for the time being, she didn't really need to go to work or anything. But Leah didn't go to babysit and hadn't returned home at all the next day. Around noon, Leah's sister calls Leah's roommate. Then they both begin calling everyone, trying to find out where Leah has gone. By the end of the next day, March 11th, and Leah was still absent, but her friends and family who expected to see her were calling her house, trying to find her. Before filing the missed person report, Kara decided to look at Leah's bank records and confirmed that she's on her road trip going across the country. She sees that after their conversation, Leah had taken $3,000 out of her account. So far, she had used debit cards and had checked into a hotel in Memphis, Tennessee. The account also showed that she used her debit card for gas after her stay in Memphis. On March 13th, the bank's statements came to a complete stop. This worried her family, and they felt that they would have definitely heard from her by then, and again, they were concerned over her emotional state. So on Monday, March 13th, her sister reported Leah missing to the Durham police. Because of the circumstances, police seemed a bit iffy. It wasn't exactly out of Leah's character to take this road trip to find herself. She was an adult and wasn't necessarily living a conventional get-a-job and work lifestyle because of her inheritance. The day after filing the missing person report, Kara and Leah's roommate searched Leah's room. A significant amount of her clothing was missing, and she had taken her cat B and had left a note. In the note, she reassured her family and friends, saying, "I'm not suicidal, I'm the opposite," and mentioned Kerouac. She also had grouped the note with about a month's worth of her share in expenses, like rent and such. This gave the suggestion to those around her that she planned on returning eventually, most likely in about a month. On the note was also a drawing of the Cheshire Cat's grin. Kara had said that Leah loved Alice in Wonderland and was fascinated with the Cheshire Cat and how it could reappear and reappear again. Kara and Nicole started searching for more answers, asking around Cup of Joe, the cafe Leah used to spend a lot of time at. That is where they found Janine, who gave them the Jack Kerouac connection. She told them Leah loved the book Dharma Bums. That is when Kara and Nicole put it together, that Leah was headed towards Desolation Peak in Washington State. March 18th, 2000. A couple are jogging when they find a car crash on Canyon Creek Road in Mount Baker National Forest. The car has North Carolina plates. On Sunday, March 19th, Kara celebrated her birthday, expecting a phone call from Leah. Instead, she got the bad news, a note from Bellingham, Washington's Sheriff's Department. Leah's car had been found. The Jeep was left with blankets and pillows covering the blown-out windows. This made investigators question and believe that somebody had been using the Jeep as a shelter of sorts after the crash. Other items found on the scene included a checkbook, guitars, CDs, and bags of clothing. These items were strewn across the area, but there was no evidence of the driver being anywhere. And investigators judged the speed of the Jeep by the damage done to the trees, and came to the conclusion that the car had been going 40 miles per hour uphill. They also believed that with the severity of the accident, there would be evidence in the car that someone was in there or that somebody was tossed out of the vehicle somewhere nearby. However, there wasn't any evidence of that. No blood from any injury, no damage to the vehicle to indicate someone was thrown from it. Nothing. 4 days later, in an attempt to find more answers, Kara and Leah's brother Heath traveled to Washington. When they arrived, Heath noticed it was a small town surrounded by what he felt was wilderness. In the documentary about the case, he even mentions that it looks like an area where if you don't know how to survive, you might not. There were also no reports of hospitals nearby treating an injured woman, especially one of Leah's characteristics. Investigators find what looks to be a memory box containing several items that gave them a general timeline. First, they found a receipt for a gas station in Oregon. The time reads 12:50 a.m. and the location was a 5-hour drive from Bellingham, where the car was found. Another item, a movie ticket for American Beauty at the Bells Fair Mall in Bellingham, 30 miles away from where the Jeep was found, dated for March 13th. With this information, Kara and Heath decide to distribute Leah's missing person flyers around Bellingham. They go to the movie theater, but nobody remembered seeing Leah there, so they try the mall. Kara sees the one sit-down restaurant and feels that would be the place Leah would go to. And she was right, because people remembered seeing her sitting down at the bar with 2 other patrons sitting beside her and talking with her. The next day, a man phones in a tip and describes Leah. He claims he talked to her and that there was another person at the bar she was talking with. The second person was contacted by police. In this statement, he recalls Leah talking about Kerouac and why she came out to Washington. The second man then tells investigators that she did not leave the restaurant alone. He gives them a very detailed description of a man named Barry who left with her, but the description was incredibly detailed to the point that the police grew concerned. The second man's story didn't line up with the first caller's tip. Since they couldn't match the stories, they suspected that the second man's story may have been made up, but still do not rule anything out. Police then process evidence in the car and actively look for proof of foul play. On Thursday, March 30th, 2000, 12 days since the car was found and 3 weeks after Leah went missing, police find that Leah had left $2,500 in cash in the car. $2,400 of it was in her pants pocket. They also find an eerie and tragic piece of evidence suggesting that Leah became a victim of foul play. Under a floorboard in her Jeep, investigators find her most prized possession, something that, according to her friends and family, she'd never take off: her mother's engagement ring. Concerned grew even more. Everything she had of value was left in the car, suggesting that something more sinister may have happened to her. Police then send out highly trained dogs and search teams. They map out a general area where they believe she might have gone, but they don't find anything. And at this point, police are certain she wasn't injured in the accident and are sure foul play is involved. They finally acquire surveillance footage from the gas station in Oregon and see Leah by herself buying stuff. Footage shows that she peers out of the gas station while she waits for the cashier to ring her up. But there were no cameras outside of the gas station to determine what exactly she was looking at. Still, investigators feel that she was fine and are sure this was a solo trip. There was no indication that she was with anybody else. Investigators worked hard, but couldn't verify whether or not Barry actually existed. They're left confused and still searching for answers. Time passes, and when Kara is contacted about her sister's car, she decides she wants investigators to keep it, hoping that maybe they'd find something that can help. Even if it would take years and years or even decades to find the evidence, they need to get a break in the case. Years go by and the case basically goes cold. But almost 7 years later, in December of 2006 in Washington, the old detectives that were assigned to Leah's case retired, and new detectives, Collins and Smith, are now on Leah's case. They discover that her vehicle had parts that weren't fully examined and that nobody ever looked under the hood. They also find out that the seatbelt hadn't been stretched at the time of the crash, meaning the Jeep had definitely been tampered with. The car had to be accelerating at a high speed to go over the embankment that it did. Investigators come to the conclusion that it would have taken someone with the know-how of a mechanic to rig the Jeep to do that. Investigators find a fingerprint on the engine. With this information, they have a possible suspect. The man who claims Barry left with Leah had been a mechanic. They track him down and find that he was now living in Canada. They request fingertips and a DNA sample so they can re-examine the evidence. It took them 2 years to get their samples, and unfortunately the fingerprints didn't match. But they did find male DNA on some evidence in her car, and from what I understand, they hadn't yet tested the DNA from their suspect. So now we can talk about some theories. There are several theories as to what happened to Leah. The first one that I would like to talk about is that Leah might have actually been depressed and committed suicide. That she might have staged the accident and just, went. But I actually don't believe that that's what happened, especially because it was so close to her sister's birthday that she went missing, that I don't think that she would have done something like that. Her family did say that they were concerned for her emotional state, so it is a possibility, but I honestly don't think that that's what happened. If anything like that did happen, I would believe that maybe the guy that was a mechanic helped her to rig it, but I really can't say that. I don't know, and I don't think that somebody would do that, especially for a stranger. Another theory is that one of the two men at the bar, and even possibly both of them, had something to do with Leah's disappearance. The second man who spoke about Barry did give investigators too much of a detailed description of Barry, and that kind of gave them a weird vibe. That, along with the fact that he was a mechanic, and you had to have mechanical knowledge to be able to tamper a vehicle and rig it to be accelerating like that, it's just very strange and very weird coincidence, if I can say so. And another theory is that Leah survived the car crash and that she wandered away from the car crash disoriented. Now, I have seen some information here and there about a possible witness account of a woman seeing a disoriented woman nearby at a gas station or a store or something like that, wandering into a gas station, I believe it was. But there's no proof that it was Leah, and there's no evidence that this person's testimony will check out or has checked out. So I'm not necessarily sure. What I believe happened is that maybe the two men had something to do with it, or maybe the second guy who talked about Barry had something to do with it. I found it very weird that investigators found it strange that he was giving such a detailed account of this man Barry, that they felt like he was made up. And I don't think that there's any other reason to lie and make up somebody else's existence and say, oh, this person who died or is missing went off with them. It's kind of like a get off of me. I would say that's what happened, but there's really no telling. So yeah, there's also another theory that I read somewhere recently that popped up, but it's kind of controversial, so I will not talk about it. But if you want any more information, please inbox me. If Leah is in the wilderness of Washington State, the only hope we really have of finding her would be the metal rod that had been placed next to her femur with a number on it specifically indicating that it belonged to Leah. The metal rod in her leg will never decompose, giving hope that one day Leah will not be missing anymore, and that her family, friends, and involved investigators haunted by her disappearance will finally have answers. If you have any information that you feel would help Leah's investigation, please contact the number below. If you know something, don't let fear get in the way of bringing justice and answers for Leah and her family. I also would like to add that no disrespect is intended towards anybody involved in any of these cases, and that my heart goes out to the families and victims. I'm sharing information that I got off of the internet in hopes of spreading awareness. If I get something wrong, I apologize in advance. Please let me know so that I can inform my audience in the comment section below.